Hey guys, it's Cam from Craft and Tailored, and in this episode of What Is On My Wrist, we are talking about an Enicar Sherpa OPS. It's a really interesting watch. I'm really excited to have this in our collection. I'm all about watches with patina, and this one has it. So let's get into the details. The reference on the Enicar Sherpa OPS is reference 144/35/03A. And what's interesting is the difference between an Enicar Sherpa and the Enicar Sherpa OPS is essentially dial, outer rotating, inner bezel, actually. So outer but inner rotating compressor style bezel. And then the cases have basically this black PVD finishing. And we'll talk a little bit about why this watch was offered with the PVD finishing and talk about the design of the watch. What's interesting is the early PVD, I think it really wasn't like a PVD. I think it was more like an anodizing kind of process to the aluminum and or some kind of other coating. And early PVD out of like the 1970s was very light, so it was not as scratch resistant as PVD or DLC coatings of like today. So what's kind of cool about these watches is that they take on typically a really nice patina over time because the finish is kind of soft and as it wears off the watch. So let me give you a little introduction to Enicar. If you are a fan of vintage watches, you probably already know about Enicar, but what's interesting about Enicar is that it's still a relatively unknown brand, but what Enicar is known for is being one of the more creatively designed vintage watches that kind of stem from the golden era. And the golden era to us is kind of in like that, like, you know, I guess you could say maybe even the late 1950s into the 1970s, where watches that ultimately now are considered icons of watch design, they kind of came from that period of time. And what's kind of cool about a lot of the Enicar watches is that they do not lack quality or anything like that. Really, they're really high quality. They're really interesting watches, but they're still also reasonably priced for really what they are and how much horological significance I think they possess. I think you get a lot of bang for your buck in these watches, and there's a lot of variety and horological significance. Maybe we could hashtag that. I don't know if that's even like a hashtag, horological significance. Enicar started in 1913, and the earlier Enicar watches are kind of relatively unknown, not really that popular. It wasn't until the 1960s and into the 1970s that Enicar created more of its sports model watches, and those are what are, I think, in many cases driving awareness towards Enicar as a vintage watch brand that stands on its own today. Enicar was a really early adopter of the EPSA design super compressor cases, and the Sherpa is a watch that definitely uses a super compressor or an EPSA case. And these watches within the sport lineup for Enicar were really produced for applications of flying, racing, diving. They really have some good sports watch DNA within the design and ultimately the complications and feature set of Enicar watches. So do yourself a favor, check out Enicar watches. There's a great book that I want to share with you as well. It's called Time for a Change, Discovering Vintage Enicar. And this is awesome. The author, Martin van der Ven, he put an amazing book together that basically went through the Enicar archive and just gives an awesome overview of the brand, the history, a really in-depth overview of the different Enicar watches, a really awesome overview of the chronographs and, you know, the divers and all that stuff. So really awesome book. I love this book. I reference this all the time when I'm looking at pieces and when I'm learning about the brand. I've learned a lot. So I think you can get this book. I'm not sure. I'll find out where you can get this, and I'll put a link in the description below so that you can purchase this. You may be able to get it through Houdinki. I know that we are building out more of a library within our shop as well. So maybe we'll be able to carry this, but this book is awesome. Highly recommend that if you want to learn a little bit more about Enicar. The Sherpa OPS under reference 144/35/03A. In my and in probably our collective at Craft and Tailored's perspective, is one of the most impressive watches that we've seen come from Enicar and mirrors the Sherpa Ultradive in its asymmetrical case design. So the Sherpa Ultradive is basically the non-PVD version of this, and we'll provide like a link in, or maybe some photos, David. One of the only ways that it differentiates itself is that it has an early PVD case layout. So the Ultradive is basically all stainless steel. The OPS has this early PVD style and has different orange accents on the dial. The Enicar Sherpa Ultradive and the Enicar Sherpa OPS are basically the same watch, but they're also not because of the dial, the bezel, and then obviously the PVD'd case. What's interesting is there are small variances between the two, but they are strikingly different watches while also remaining very closely similar in design. But the main differentiator outside of the inner rotating bezel and some accents on the dial is the PVD case, with the OPS being the black version. OPS basically stems from the watch being a watch that was intended for military issue. If you look at the watch, it is very rugged. The watch in the original catalog was actually offered on a tropic style strap instead of a bracelet, which is very military-esque. You know, the black PVD case was supposed to be, you know, more anti-reflective and, you know, basically more technical and military-like. You can see the same thing in like some of the Hoyer watches and the Porsche design watches. I think there was like this introduction of PVD. So the Sherpa OPS was never actually military issued, although it would be hard to say that it isn't really heavily inspired by watches with military applications. Even the name Sherpa OPS, I think, it kind of embellishes like that Cold War era secret agent, kind of like special ops kind of dude who's gonna be in all black, maybe in a ski mask with like, you know, what is that, Nick? An HP5 with the silencer on it? MPK5? HP5? Is it MPK5? God, all the gun people are gonna, should I say firearms or gun? Can you put a silencer on anything?
Not in California.
So patented in 1956 by Irvin Bequez SA, or EPSA, the super compressor case basically possesses a unique sealing system that sets it apart from other dive watch cases of the late 1950s into the 1960s and into the 1970s. Essentially, a super compressor case has like a spring in the mid case, and what happens, or a spring and gasket. And what happens is the deeper this watch goes, basically the watch compresses onto itself, making it more and more water resistant the deeper or the more compressed the case will become as a result of the outside pressure of the case. What's interesting about the case is it's 43 millimeters in width, or the case size is technically 43 millimeters, but it's not that big. On most super compressor cases, we're gonna have two crowns, and the top crown here located, we'll say, you know, the 2-ish o'clock position, essentially when engaged, rotates that inner rotating timing ring or inner rotating bezel, if you wanna call it that. Okay, so that's what the top crown does. The bottom crown, when pulled out, sets the time. And what's cool about this specific movement is it has a push-pull feature for quickly jumping the date. So that's kind of, it's a pump and pull to quickly advance the date. So in any case, really, really interesting case design. This is through and through an EPSA style case. One thing I'll show you as well, which I love, is basically the Sherpa case back. We've got like a little like mollusk with a pearl in it. It's probably an oyster with a pearl, which is kind of funny. We've got the reference number down here. And the cool thing about Enicar is their logo for the brand is like this little planet with like a ring around it. So what's interesting about this specific Sherpa OPS is that the case is unpolished, but it kind of has taken on this really cool patina as a result of just being worn and kind of used. And so you kind of have like these graying crosshatch dual, you know, crowns with the Enicar logo on them. And then you kind of have like this like warm kind of grayish patina to the outer case. The dial remains in really, really nice condition. And one thing that I really love about the Enicar Sherpas and a lot of just like the Enicar EPSA sport watches is they have this really big, awesome, like domey crystal. So kind of something to take note of there. The dial of this specific example is in stellar condition. The hands, the date wheel, the inner rotating bezel, it's all there. It's all good. In any case, shout out Time for a Change. Really great book. If you can get it, highly recommend that you pick it up. Great Enicar history here. I would highly advise looking at Enicars. I think they're a lot of value, a lot of bang for their buck. It's a watch that is quickly increasing in value and in popularity. So watches like this, as they come up, they typically don't last because there's a lot of, again, value in watches like this. I'll provide a link in the description below so that you can check out this specific example. So as always, guys, thanks for tuning in. If you are not doing so already, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Craft and Tailored. Of course, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you've got watch questions, we are here and happy to help. Drop us a line at info@craftandtailored.com. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you in the next one.